By the time my father asked, "You coming Sunday?" I already knew it was not an invitation. It was placement, a chair being assigned before I even walked into the room. That was his way. He did not bark orders. He arranged people. He said things gently enough that objecting made you sound difficult, and agreeing felt like good manners instead of surrender. If you loved him, or just wanted a quiet evening, you learned to step where he pointed and call it peace. So, I said yes. My name is Tessa Whitmore. I am 29 years old, and I have spent most of my adult life being useful in ways that stop looking like love once people get used to receiving them. I live in a one-bedroom apartment across Charlotte. I work for an insurance company, reading the paper trail of damaged homes all day long. Roofs, pipes, repairs, the small, expensive ways a house can start slipping out from under people before the neighbors notice anything from the street. Sunday dinner was at my father's place, the same white house where my mother used to open the windows before guests came and say fresh air fixed more than people gave it credit for. I still brought peach cobbler. I still let myself in through the side door. I still acted like habit and belonging were the same thing. Shannon was already there. My brother Noah was in the living room with the game on low. My father was setting plates on the table like he was preparing a stage. Then came the line that stayed under my skin. Shannon mentioned changing the guest room. My father smiled and said, "Once we settle things here, the house will finally feel orderly again." Orderly. Not warmer, not happier. Orderly. I smiled the way daughters do when they have learned not to stop a dinner over one sentence. I ate. I cleaned. I rinsed serving spoons at the sink and watched the backyard go gold in the last light. Then Monday morning came, and my own screen showed me something tied to that house my father had never mentioned to me. Why was there a refinance request attached to his address? I clicked into the refinance file twice because the first time felt like a mistake. My father's address was there. The White House. The same one where my mother used to line up side dishes on the counter every Thanksgiving and complain that nobody ever brought serving spoons. The applicant line showed Douglas Whitmore. The property details were mostly ordinary. Loan amount, estimated value, occupancy. Then I got to the ownership section, and the wording turned slippery. Not false, just careful. The kind of careful that usually means someone is trying to lean on a fact without saying it too plainly. I was not allowed to handle a file tied to my own family. That part was clear. So I did what people in my line of work do when something feels wrong but is not yet yours to touch. I read only what I was allowed to read, then sat very still and let the pattern form. Ownership was being described around, not through. That bothered me because I had been paying into that house for years with no one ever treating me like I had standing to ask questions. Roof repair after the storm 3 summers ago. A tax shortage notice my father called a temporary squeeze. The heating system that quit in January and somehow became my emergency by dinner and his gratitude by morning. I had sent the money every time because that was what family meant to me then. You keep the house standing. You do not ask for receipts on love, but now all those payments sat in my memory differently. So did his recent comments. You should call before dropping by. Things are changing around here. Shannon never said anything openly rude. She did not have to. She moved through those rooms like a woman practicing for permanence. Noah told me not to make it bigger than it was, which was exactly the kind of sentence people use when they need you to stay quiet for their own comfort. At lunch, I stepped outside and called Evelyn Cross. She had known my grandmother Margaret. She had handled old family paperwork years ago. I kept my voice careful and asked one narrow question about the legal structure of the house. There was a pause. Then Evelyn said, "Come by after work." Her tone was calm, too calm. When she opened the old file that evening, she looked at me over her glasses and said, "Tessa, your father was never supposed to have the final say over that house." Evelyn did not ease into it. She turned the file toward me and laid out the truth in plain English, the kind that leaves no room for hope to hide behind confusion. After my mother died, my grandmother placed the house into a trust. My father had the right to live there. That was real. But he was never given the full authority he had been performing all these years. The control sat somewhere else. With me. Not when I was little. Not all at once. But once I was old enough. Any major change to that property sale, refinance, new co-owner, any attempt to fold someone else into the house legally was supposed to pass through my approval. I stared at the page until the words stopped looking like words and started looking like the shape of my whole adult life. Evelyn kept going. She prepared copies of the trust, a confirming letter, and a formal notice blocking any property change without my signature. She did not dramatize it. That made it hit harder. By the time she slid the envelope across her desk, my hands felt oddly steady. 3 days later, my father hosted a family dinner to announce his engagement. The backyard smelled like smoke and barbecue sauce. A folding table had been opened and covered. Shannon wore a soft blue dress. My Aunt Trish brought potato salad. Noah brought beer and the expression of a man hoping nothing would happen while already knowing something would. My father stood when dessert plates were still on the table. He smiled the way he smiled when he wanted the room to feel arranged around him. He talked about new beginnings, stability, a future with Shannon. Then he looked straight at me. After this, he said lightly, things will be different. No one spoke. Then he added, still smiling, this is your last meal in this house. The room went thin around me. I did not argue. I did not ask him what he meant. I reached into my bag, took out Evelyn's envelope, and set it on the table between the cobbler dish and the stack of paper napkins. Yours too, I said. He frowned, opened it, and read. Then he read it again. The color left his face so fast it looked pulled. You can't do this. I held his eyes across the table and said, no. Grandma already did. For a few seconds after I said it, nobody moved, not my aunt, not Noah, not Shannon. Even the little sounds people make without thinking, the shift of a chair, a glass set down, a fork against a plate, seemed to leave the table all at once. My father tried to recover first. That was his instinct. Not truth, not apology. Control. He turned another page of the trust, slower this time, and I saw it then, the small tremor in his hand. His face was still arranged. His voice almost was. Shannon leaned toward him and asked, very quietly, Doug, what is this? He did not answer her. Aunt Trish held out her hand. Let me see that. He hesitated just long enough to make the silence worse, then passed her the papers. She read carefully, lips tightening as she went. By the second page, she was no longer confused. She was angry. Noah looked from her to me, then back to Dad, like he was trying to find the version of the room that had existed 10 minutes earlier and could not get back to it. Dad cleared his throat. I have lived in this house for years. I paid bills in that house. I kept that place running. I am her father. I did not raise my voice. Grandma put the house in a trust. I said, you had the right to live there. You did not have the right to refinance it, add Shannon to anything, or make ownership decisions without me. The words landed hard enough on their own. I did not need to decorate them. Then I added the part I had not meant to say out loud. I paid for the roof. I covered the heating system. I sent money for taxes. I did all that without knowing the full truth. That was when Shannon finally understood what kind of dinner she had walked into. Not an engagement dinner. An exposure. No one reached for their fork. Dad lowered his voice and said, this is not over, and sitting there with the smell of barbecue going cold between us. I realized the worst thing might not be the paper at all. It might be how much he had known before I ever saw it. My father called before I got home. I let it ring. Then he called again, and again. By the 4th time, I knew what he was doing. He was trying to get to me before the truth had time to settle into shape, before I could sit with it long enough to stop calling it a misunderstanding. When I finally listened to the voicemail, his voice was tight and controlled. After all I've done for you? The next one was colder. You humiliated your father. The third tried to sound wounded. This house stayed standing because of me. That was the line that made me sit down on the edge of my bed and stare at the wall. Not because I believed it, because I knew he did, or wanted to. He was already building the version of the story where I was an ungrateful daughter who used paperwork like a weapon at a family dinner. Noah texted late that night. Maybe you could have handled it differently. I looked at that sentence for a long time. It was exactly the kind of sentence people send when they want the pain to go away without deciding who caused it. Shannon sent nothing at all. The next morning, Dad left a calmer message. Too calm. Come by tonight, just you and me. Let's talk like family. No lawyer, no paper trail, no witnesses. Just the old system restored in a quieter room. I texted back once. Not without counsel. That was the first boundary I had ever set with him that did not come wrapped in apology. Around noon, Aunt Trish called. She did not tell me to keep the peace. She did not say fathers make mistakes. She asked one question, low and direct. Did your grandmother mean for you to be protected from him? I did not answer right away, because hearing it said out loud changed something. That afternoon, Evelyn called me back. I went deeper into the old file. She said, Tessa, I found a receipt letter. Your father signed for it years ago. My throat tightened. Signed for what? For written notice of the trust's limits? Evelyn had the copy waiting when I got to her office. It was a one-page letter on old firm stationery, yellowed at the corners. The kind of document that looks small until it reaches into your life and changes the size of everything around it. She slid it across the desk and tapped the bottom with one finger. Read the last line? I did. It stated, in plain language, that my father had the right to remain in the house as a resident. Not owner. Not decision-maker. Resident? It also said he could not sell it, refinance it, transfer any interest in it, or add another person to ownership without the approval of the trust beneficiary once she reached legal age. Me? At the bottom was a dated acknowledgement, received by Douglas Whitmore. His signature sat there in dark ink, steady and unmistakable. I read it twice because I wanted the second reading to change the first one. It did not. That was the moment the whole story turned uglier. Before that, some part of me had still been leaving space for confusion. Maybe he had blurred the truth over time. Maybe years had hardened into assumption. Maybe he had begun by misunderstanding and simply never corrected course. Painful? Yes. Wrong? Yes. But human? This killed that. He had known. Not every detail. Maybe not every page by heart. But enough. Enough to know that all those years he had spoken like the house was his by right. He had been stepping over a line he had already been shown. Enough to know that every time he told me, this isn't your concern. He had been making a choice. Not a mistake. The first pain had been hearing him try to throw me out. The deeper one was this: he had lived inside that lie long enough to furnish it. Aunt Trish did not mince words when I told her. Margaret saw him clearly. She said, long before the rest of us wanted to. Noah called that night and sounded different, quieter, ashamed. He started naming moments out loud. Repairs, tax notices, decisions I was pushed away from. He was finally hearing the pattern inside them. Shannon sent a short message just before midnight. I won't be moving in. I stared at it, then set the phone down. I was done leaving the door open for this to become small again. Not because I wanted revenge, because if I backed down now, I would keep living like a guest in my own life. My father still did not apologize. He sent one text. You're tearing this family apart. The calls started the next morning. Not to pressure me into apologizing. Not to tell me I had gone too far. This time, people wanted the truth. Real questions, quiet ones. The kind people ask when the version they were given no longer survives contact with facts. Aunt Trish helped that along. She did not let anyone turn this into family drama or a daughter humiliating her father. She told them exactly what it was. "This is not about hurt feelings," she said. "It's about ownership and a lie that lasted too long." Once that sentence got into the family, the ground shifted. Noah came to my apartment that evening with takeout and a face that already looked sorry. He sat at my kitchen table and said what he should have said years earlier. "I knew you were paying more than Dad ever admitted. The roof, the heat, taxes. I knew. I just kept acting like it wasn't my business. That hurt. Not because it surprised me, because hearing it out loud made the silence around me look even worse." Dad, meanwhile, was busy trying to save himself with a cleaner story. He told people I was using legal paperwork to take a house from an aging father, that I had turned cold, that I had made a family matter ugly. But the signed letter kept wrecking that version before it could settle. Then Shannon stepped out. No screaming, no dramatic scene. She simply ended the engagement. She was not going to build a future on top of a lie she had now seen in daylight. A day later, I drove past the house and did not stop. I looked at it from the street and understood that what I was taking back was not just property. It was the right to stop being erased. That was the thought still sitting in me when Evelyn called. He spoke to a broker before the dinner. She said, "If he tried borrowing against the house, knowing those limits, this may become a real legal problem." Evelyn moved faster after that call. By the end of the next day, my father had a formal warning in his hands. It stated, plainly, that any financial move based on him acting like full owner of that house had to stop immediately. No refinance, no borrowing against it, no paperwork that blurred the trust or stepped around it. And if he had signed or submitted anything while hiding those limits, the consequences could get expensive fast. For the first time since this started, he looked frightened, not insulted, not angry in that polished, wounded way he'd liked to wear when he wanted sympathy. Frightened. His voice changed with it. He no longer sounded like the man at the head of the table deciding who belonged in the room. He sounded like someone hearing the walls answer back. Noah went to see him before I did. He told me later that the conversation had been quiet, which somehow made it hit harder. No shouting, no slammed doors, just my brother standing there for once without sliding to the safer side of the truth. "You knew enough," Noah had said. "That's the part you keep trying to dodge." Aunt Trish was less gentle. This didn't start when she put down that paper. She told him, "It started when you taught her to shrink." That line stayed with me because it named the thing underneath the house, underneath the money, underneath all of it. He had trained me to get smaller and call it respect. When Evelyn asked what timeline I wanted for him to leave, I gave him something reasonable, not because he deserved softness, because I was done being shaped by his kind of cruelty. I was taking back what was mine. I was not using it to make someone kneel, claiming, not revenge. He tried to apologize after that, but even then, he kept circling the wrong injury. His embarrassment, his stress, his pride, never the actual wound. A day later, while clearing one of my mother's old kitchen drawers, I found an envelope with my name on it in my grandmother Margaret's handwriting. It had never been given to me. My father started moving out on a Thursday. There was no final speech, no broken plate, no scene big enough to satisfy the cheap part of a person that wants pain to come with theater. Just boxes. Tape. The dull scrape of furniture being shifted by a man who had spent years acting like the house answered to him and now had to leave it one room at a time. That felt sadder than I expected. Not softer. Not better. Just sadder. Shannon was gone by then. Not ruined. Not exposed. She had simply stepped back far enough to see that the foundation under that future was rotten, and she had been wise enough not to call that love. Noah came by that afternoon while the hallway was crowded with boxes and said what mattered without trying to make himself feel cleaner than he was. I left you alone in this too long. He did not ask me to forgive him. That helped. Later, when the house had gone quiet again, I opened the letter my grandmother had left. Her handwriting tilted slightly to the right, the same way it had on birthday cards and grocery lists, and every small thing she ever wrote like it deserved neatness. In the letter, she said some people keep a house with money, some with rules, some with volume. But the people who make it a home are the ones whose presence steadies the rooms. Then she wrote the line that broke me. I am leaving this house to you because you are the only one who has ever made this place feel lived in, not possessed. I cried then, not because I had won, because for the first time in my life, I understood I had not imagined any of it. That night, I stood outside the front door with my key in my hand and realized the hardest part would not be walking in. It would be walking in without feeling like I still needed permission. I moved in quietly. No champagne, no big reveal, no moment designed to look like victory from the outside. I carried in 2 boxes, a lamp, my overnight bag, and the framed photograph of my mother that had somehow spent too many years pushed a little too far to the side. Then I walked through the house room by room in silence. The hallway still held that faint lemon cleaner smell she used to love. The back bedroom caught afternoon light the way it always had, in the dining room. I straightened one chair, opened the curtains, and set the table the way people do when they want a room to feel lived in again instead of guarded. I rehung the crooked picture. I replaced nothing grand, just small things, enough to make the house exhale. That was when I understood the difference. My father did not lose that house because I was cruel. He lost the right to use it to make me smaller. Noah started coming by differently after that. Not with empty hands. Not with the old assumption that I would carry the hard part because I always had. We were not magically healed, just more honest. Sometimes that is the cleaner mercy. I have not repaired things with my father. I have also stopped pretending truth is supposed to leave everything looking pretty. Some storms do not destroy a home. They show you which beams were cracked all along. If this story stayed with you, maybe it is because a lot of people spend years standing politely outside places, relationships, or versions of themselves they were told they had not earned yet. And sometimes the door was never locked. Sometimes the hardest thing is not forcing it open. It is believing you were allowed to walk through it all along. So if a part of this felt familiar, tell me in the comments what moment hit you hardest. There is a difference between being invited in and finally understanding you were never the one who had to wait at the door.